Have you ever heard of the Joseon king who reigned for only 4 years, whose life was a whirlwind of political intrigue, chronic illness, and a deeply controversial death? Today, we're diving into the turbulent story of Gyeongjong, the 20th king of Joseon. His tale is a dramatic chapter in Korean history, filled with palace power struggles and mysteries that historians still debate to this day. Gyeongjong was born Yi-yoon in 1688. His birth should have been a moment of pure joy for the kingdom. He was the first son of King Seokjong and the famous royal consort, Jang Ok-jong, better known as Jang Hui-bin. You might recognize her name. She's one of the most iconic figures from the Joseon Dynasty, often portrayed in dramas as a woman of immense ambition and beauty. For a while, it seemed like her star was rising, and her son was destined for greatness. Just 2 years after his birth, at the tender age of 2, Yi-yoon was officially named the Crown Prince. This was a huge deal. It secured his position as the heir to the throne and seemed to set his future in stone. His mother, Jang Hui-bin, was also elevated to the status of queen consort. It was the peak of her power and influence. Imagine the scene at the palace, a young, newly appointed queen and her toddler son, the future of the nation. Everything seemed perfect. But in the cutthroat world of the Joseon court, perfect never lasts long. The political landscape was divided into factions, each vying for the king's favor. The two major factions at the time were the Noron, or Old Learning, and the Soron, or New Learning. The Noron faction had supported King Seokjong's previous queen, Queen Inhyeon, who had been deposed to make way for Jang Hui-bin. Naturally, they weren't happy. The Soron faction, on the other hand, were the ones who backed Crown Prince Yi-yoon and his mother. This set the stage for a bitter and relentless power struggle. The tide began to turn dramatically against the Crown Prince and his mother. 6 years after becoming queen, Jang Hui-bin was demoted back to her original rank of Hui-bin. Queen Inhyeon was reinstated, a major victory for the Noron faction. The court was a battlefield of whispers and accusations. Then, in 1701, a tragedy struck that would haunt the Crown Prince for the rest of his life. Queen Inhyeon died of an unknown illness. The finger of blame was immediately pointed at Jang Hui-bin. King Seokjong discovered that she had conspired with a shaman to place a curse on the queen, hoping for her death. In his grief and rage, Seokjong ordered Jang Hui-bin's execution by poison. The Crown Prince, who was only about 13 at the time, was devastated. He reportedly begged his father to spare his mother's life, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. He had to witness his own mother's tragic end, a traumatic event that would leave deep psychological and, some say, physical scars. This event had a profound impact on the Crown Prince. He became withdrawn and was plagued by frequent illnesses. The court was filled with rumors. The Noron faction, his mother's old enemies, saw him as a liability. They whispered that he was mentally and physically unfit to rule. They feared that if he ever took the throne, he would seek revenge on those who had contributed to his mother's downfall. His position as heir, once so secure, was now constantly under threat. Seeing the Crown Prince's frail health and the political instability, King Seokjong took an unusual step. He adopted a son from a distant royal relative, Prince Yeoning, who would later become the famous King Yeongjo. Prince Yeoning was bright, healthy, and charismatic. Everything the Crown Prince wasn't, at least in the eyes of the Noron faction. They immediately began to champion Prince Yeoning as a more suitable heir. The court was now split into two camps, the Soron, who remained fiercely loyal to Crown Prince Yi-yoon, and the Noron, who openly favored Prince Yeoning. King Seokjong found himself caught in the middle. The pressure from the Noron faction grew so intense that they pushed for Prince Yeoning to be officially named as the Crown Prince's regent, to handle state affairs on his behalf due to his poor health. This was a direct challenge to Yi-yoon's authority. The Soron faction fought back, arguing that the crown prince was perfectly capable of ruling and that this was just a ploy by the Noron to seize power. The tension was palpable. The palace was a pressure cooker, and at the center of it all was a sick and grieving young man trying to hold on to the position he was born for. Finally, in 1720, after a long and dramatic reign, King Gyeongjong passed away. At the age of 32, Crown Prince Yeon ascended the throne as King Gyeongjong. His supporters, the Soron faction, were finally in power. Their first move? They accused the Noron leaders of plotting to usurp the throne by trying to replace Gyeongjong with his half-brother, Prince Yeoning. This led to a massive purge. Key Noron officials were stripped of their titles and exiled. It was a swift and brutal act of political revenge known as the Shinim Literati Purge. But King Gyeongjong's health problems didn't disappear just because he was king. In fact, the stress of ruling seemed to make them worse. He was often bedridden, unable to attend to the daily duties of a monarch. This gave the Noron faction, even in their weakened state, an opening. They renewed their calls for Prince Yeoning to be installed as regent to manage the kingdom. Just 2 years into his reign, the pressure became too much. Gyeongjong officially named his brother, Prince Yeoning, as the Crown Prince royal brother, and appointed him as regent to rule in his place. This was an unprecedented move, effectively handing over the reins of power while he was still alive. It was a victory for the Noron, and a sign of just how precarious Gyeongjong's hold on the throne really was. But Gyeongjong's reign, and his life, would come to a sudden and mysterious end just 2 years later, in 1724. He was only 35 years old. The official cause of death was food poisoning after eating contaminated seafood, but the circumstances surrounding his death immediately sparked suspicion. Here's where the story takes a dark turn. On the night he died, Gyeongjong had complained of severe stomach pains. His brother, the regent Prince Yeoning, brought him marinated crab and persimmons. Now, in traditional Korean medicine, this combination was believed to be toxic. Shortly after eating the food, Gyeongjong's condition worsened dramatically, and he died. The Soron faction was outraged. They openly accused Prince Yeoning of assassinating his brother to seize the throne. Was it an intentional act of poisoning, or was it a terrible, tragic mistake made by a brother trying to help? Or was it simply a coincidence, and the king succumbed to his pre-existing illnesses? We will likely never know for sure. This accusation of regicide would hang over Prince Yeoning for his entire 52-year reign as King Yeongjo, becoming a permanent stain on his legacy. And so, the short, tragic reign of King Gyeongjong came to an end. A king defined by illness, haunted by his mother's death, and trapped in the crossfire of political factions. His life was a constant struggle, and his death remains one of Joseon's greatest unsolved mysteries. He was a man who inherited a crown, but never had the chance to truly wear it. What do you think happened? Was Gyeongjong's death a tragic accident or a cold-blooded political assassination? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Joseon history. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the past. See you next time.